Hello, my name is Sapora Weissman. I'm a therapist in California, and I am talking to Joey Lott today about misophonia. And this is part of the Misophonia Freedom Project, which is gathering stories of people who are doing a lot better from misophonia. The disclaimer in advance is I apologize for any trigger noises. There will be probably talks about triggers in this video. And if you are having a serious mental health issue, please see a licensed professional in your state. So, hello, Joey.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, so I guess you struggled with misophonia and you are better from it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. Um, and you wrote a little book on it, which I thought was a very affordable book, which I thought was very kind of you to do. I also know that you've had a lot of other struggles in your life that you have worked hard to overcome. So I thought that was pretty amazing. But yeah, if you want to just share maybe a little bit about misophonia, and then I can ask you some questions. Do you want to do that?
You mean share about my experience?
Yeah, I guess. Well, I guess we could just go into it and yeah, your experience of it came on for you mainly when you were in your 20s, is that correct?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Can you share what that was like for you?
Um, so it started with specific things. Um, I remember that there were like the sound of a distant dog barking, and the sound of a
Hmm.
ticking clock were two of the things that I can remember that first were very disturbing to me. Um, I hadn't
Hmm.
experienced that before, so it stood out for me that it was strange that those things were bothering me so much. I mean, I couldn't seem to let go of it. Um, and then
Hmm.
it mostly stayed with just a handful of things like that for mm, maybe 10 years, actually. There were just a few things that
Hmm.
were troublesome for me in terms of sound. I had other issues, other things that were bothering me, but not sounds at that time. And then it was
Hmm.
when I was in my, I think this is true. I don't remember the exact timeline, but I think it wasn't until I was in my early 30s that it became much more problematic, and that many things were troublesome for me. Many sounds became troublesome for me, and it became so painful
Hmm.
that I just felt like I wanted to. I felt very desperate. I felt that it felt very hopeless. There was no way out of it that I could figure, and so that was when it became a really big problem. And at that time, I uh, think it took me a few years. I think if I'm just thinking about the timeline. Um, it wasn't. It was maybe like two years, or maybe yeah, about 2 years of that. And then I realized that
Hmm.
I really needed to figure it out. I really had to solve that problem.
Um, okay, so it started just with the ticking clocks and the dog barking, and but then it escalated to what types of sounds did it escalate to? I'm curious.
um, any kind of body sounds became very
Oh,
upsetting to me. It felt uh, like it felt like my whole body was. It was a very unpleasant sensation that I experienced whenever I heard any body sounds. And so I have a family. I was married. I am married, but I was married at that time too. And so those sounds that I was hearing, like, chewing sounds, or just like any kind of mouth sound, or
mhm.
any of those sounds, were very, very um, painful.
Okay. And was your so I have heard that before for literal pain that people felt in their bodies
Mhm.
when they hear a trigger noise. So I have heard that. Was your reaction anger, anxiety, disgust, or what kind of reactions do you remember having?
Um, so it was primarily the that, I guess you could call it, a somatic component. It was mostly that feeling that I just
Okay.
really did not like. But in terms of emotional charges, there was some definitely anger. It definitely felt anger, and and then uh,
Okay.
then despair. Like I said, so it would be like anger, and then this depression
Mm,
slash despair.
okay. Yeah. Okay. Um, because it's interesting, were you sensitive to sounds as a child? Do you remember that? Just remember being just sensitive in general as a kid?
Well, I was definitely sensitive, but I was not sensitive to sounds as a child.
Mhm.
My
Okay.
my mother
Interesting.
was.
Um, hmm, that's interesting. And yes, there's the idea that there's a genetic component of misophonia, but then I've also heard that, is it genetic or is it just an emotional learning of the brain that a child picks up from their parent, or it's both. So it's kind of interesting to think about that. Um, during your 20s, was there also something? Well, I guess you were going through other things. So,
Mhm.
other stressful things, is that correct? That
Correct.
while
Yeah.
this kind of crept up on you?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Um, okay. Um, I'm just looking at my notes. Yeah, so I have my own issues with sound, and I work with people with this, and for a lot of people, there's a trauma component that I feel goes along with this, and I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, certainly I would say that that was the case for me. I was I was just in a basically, I was stuck in a traumatized state, just continuously re-traumatizing myself for a long, long time. From the time I definitely from the time I was and maybe 11 years old, and
Mm,
so
okay.
very high anxiety, and
Mhm,
and so that was a very significant component for me.
mhm. Yeah. And there was the other issues you struggled with later in life, because you do write about them, are some
Mhm.
like health issues, correct? That, which I again related to you, because I also struggle with similar things. But we could talk about that another day. Um, yeah. So yeah, so you're already kind of primed as a kid to be hyper alert if you've dealt with trauma as a
Right.
child, and your brain is kind of scanning probably for a bit of danger signals and stuff like that. Um, um, do you relate to the highly sensitive person label?
Um, I don't know the definition that's used for that, but I certainly
Mhm,
would um, say that, as I already said, I do perceive that I have long been very sensitive.
mhm. Okay.
So
Okay.
sensitive
Yeah, I
to,
know a lot of people with misophonia. Yeah.
yeah, just like sensitive to environment, environmental cues, social cues,
Mhm,
wanting to
mhm,
know how other
mhm,
people are feeling, wanting to monitor and make sure that everybody
mhm,
else is feeling
mhm.
okay, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes, that feels it's like an empath, highly sensitive person. It's similar, not exactly the same, but yeah, I think the research on highly sensitive people is that we do take in more of our environment. We do can feel other people's emotions and things like that. And I know a lot of people with misophonia relate to that, which is interesting. But also, if you've experienced childhood trauma too, you are probably going to be more hypersensitive to things also. So it's all, who knows? Epigenetics, you can add that in there too. Um, so when you, um, how did you find out like, oh, I have this thing called misophonia? Um,
Well, I
or
guess
what it was, and then, yeah.
fortunately for me, I think about the I didn't know about the condition of misophonia until after I had already uh, helped myself to resolve it. So
Mhm.
I I
Wow.
didn't I didn't do I didn't do any research into it. I just um, resolved it without knowing about a name for it.
It's interesting. Yeah. I know back in the day there really wasn't much of a name for it, or it wasn't, yeah, so it's a little more well known now. But did you go to providers or therapists, or what did you, I'm curious if you tried things that just did not work, or go to people that said, "Oh, I'll try to help you," and it just didn't work.
So I never tried anything specific. I never went to anybody specific for this. Um, it never even occurred to me to go to anybody specifically for the sound issue because I I had so many problems that that was not the main thing. That it never occurred to me that that was my problem. I I never thought to go to anybody for that and mention that to anybody. I went to see people about many of the other things that I perceived that I was struggling with, and um, I I don't think that I can't think of any time when I found any help from anybody in regard to any of those things. Um, that might have
Mm.
been more to do with my lack of self awareness at that time than anything else.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, yeah. So there was just for you, there was a lot going on at once, it seems. Which I understand that
Mhm.
well. Um, so then, yeah, so then I guess you took it in your own hands from the book that you, and it's interesting some of the things that you wrote in your book. Yeah, I could speak to and why it makes sense to me. But I mean, so then you just started doing your own research and trying to figure this out on your own. And how did you go about that?
Um, well, I don't, I don't think I did any research. I just maybe intuitively sensed that, hmm, oh, I think what it was that so I had big anxiety problems. And the anxiety was the bigger problem in my life. The the sound sensitivity was relative to the anxiety was not as problematic because uh, the anxiety was so severe that it was completely ruining my life. And so I knew that if I didn't do something to successfully address the anxiety, then I was on a course to quick death. And so I and nothing that I had done and nothing that I had tried for the anxiety had been helpful, presumably because I didn't do the right things and I didn't go to the right people who had the right knowledge, because the knowledge does exist and there are people who know how to help, but I didn't meet those people because I didn't know. But
Sure.
eventually I found that um, I just had to take it into my own hands, and I realized that when I really analyzed what was going on, that it was because I was struggling because I was trying to avoid the problem. And I realized that
Mhm.
trying to avoid was making it worse. I saw that there was a very definite pattern where trying to avoid the anxiety made it worse over time. And so I realized that I needed to, instead of trying to avoid it, I need to experience it consciously and face that. And so I chose
Mhm.
to do that with the anxiety, and I had very good results. And then I realized after that
Mhm.
that I could apply the same approach to the sound sensitivity, which is what I did with very good results. So I think
Okay.
you could maybe view it as a kind of desensitization.
Okay. You shared in your book, um, sitting with the sensations, the somatic sensations, right?
Yes. Mhm.
And that, so it's, and when I read that, because I know there's some people in the world of misophonia that say you have to relax your body when you're in a trigger noise. And you explained it well in your book that that's just sending messages to your brain that there's something wrong, right? If you're trying to
Mhm.
get rid of a feeling in your body, right?
Yeah.
And it also, in my training of chronic pain, there's something called somatic tracking where you sit with those uncomfortable sensations and you sit with it and it sends messages of safety to your brain. And it
Yeah.
seems that that you did that.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because maybe it's just a language thing. For me, I think of that as relaxation because it's,
Mm.
for me, the non-relaxation is the attempt to avoid the sensations, which leads to more tension. Whereas if I don't try to avoid and I just allow the sensations, then naturally I start to relax.
Mm. Hmm. Yes. So yeah, I understand what you're saying. So you would just sit with it and until it then the sensation kind of went down on its own.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious at a details, because I've had some clients where I've recommended this and they say, oh no, I can't do that. There's no way I could do that. There's no way. So it does take a lot of effort to do something like that for sure. But how long would you sit? with if there was something that bothered you, a sound, that you would just sit there and be with the sensations in your body before they
As
might have softened.
um, well, always as long as it takes, but sometimes it doesn't take
Mm-hmm.
very long. Sometimes it's a few seconds, and sometimes it's longer. It could be
Mm-hmm.
minutes, or I don't think usually longer than maybe 5 minutes.
Okay. Okay. That's helpful. Okay. Um, so you did this kind of, I'm witnessing this, I'm being with these sensations. And then I also noticed in your book, you did some self-administered eye movement therapy
Hmm.
on memories.
Correct.
Yeah. Can you speak to that a bit? Yeah.
Um, yes. So I I was I think that must have been inspired. I don't remember where I got that idea from. Um, I know that's an idea. I know there's I know there are several therapies that rely on eye movement,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't remember if I got that idea from those or if I learned about those afterward. I had also, because I had maybe learned about eye movement. I think I had heard about some benefits of bilateral movement in general. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that is maybe, I don't know, maybe I had learned that from some kind of Eastern philosophy or something. Um, and I was just practicing that, and then maybe I just had the idea to just do it with the eyes because it was kind of
Mm-hmm.
difficult to be doing it with other parts of the body all the time. But it definitely worked.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what I think I must have. Um, oh, I think I had gotten. I think I had read about. So I had been. I think I know what it is now. I had been practicing EFT. So you may be familiar with EFT. It's the
Mm-hmm.
tapping thing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Tapping. Yeah.
yeah. And I was getting
Mm-hmm.
good benefits with that, but I had the sense that it was maybe there was some extraneous stuff there. Like I didn't wasn't convinced that the tapping was necessary. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
and then I realized that maybe it was primarily just the willingness to go into the content and instead of avoiding it, just to be willing to go into it. And I was doing that with a lot of memories. So a lot of the EFT that I
Mm-hmm.
was doing was specific with memories. And then I started doing it with the eye movement instead of tapping because I found that the eye movement would help just to release the charge very quickly. And so I was doing that and I got very good results with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just focus on the memory, whatever the charged memory was. So I just made a list of all of the memories that were had a charge for me, a negative charge. And there were a lot of them. And then I just systematically went through that list and until the charge was removed from the thing. And I found that as I did that, then
Mm-hmm.
my symptoms improved. It felt much better.
That's pretty amazing that you did it on your own. And I know in my first video, there was somebody that worked on memories on her own too, or that you just figured that out. And that how memories can be linked to this. I think there's a lot of pieces to misophonia too. What do you think? was it for you, was it a gradual shift of like, oh, things are feeling better around the sound sensitivity, or was it just like one day you worked on a couple memories and it was gone, and you've been practicing the somatic work? Like, how was it for you?
It's a really good question, and I don't remember because that was more than 10 years ago. And so I don't really remember exactly. It must not have been an instantaneous thing because I might have noticed that. It might have been like, if it was a miraculous, instantaneous thing, I probably would remember that. So it must have been more gradual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Okay, yeah. That's what, yeah, it kind of seemed like the first person that I interviewed, it was a kind of a gradual sort of thing. Um, where would you say, I'm kind of bouncing around a bit now, but if you, on a scale of 0 to 10, where you started with sound sensitivity, 10 being the worst, 0 being, where were you and when you started, and where are you now?
Well, I I can't compare to other people because I don't know what other people's experiences are. But for myself, it felt very bad. So I would
Yeah.
classify it as a 10 because it was very
Mhm.
problematic and painful. And and then, I mean, now I'd say a 0. Um, there are times, so over the last 10 years, there have been a few times when I've noticed some residues of those experiences. Um, they haven't been very strong, and when they happen, I know how to deal with it. So in that sense, I know that it can happen, or at least it has happened. I don't remember the last time it happened, but not, I don't think in the last couple of years, um, but it's not anything that I have any concern about. So that's why I would say a 0.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I want to circle back, if it's okay, because I look at, as I've been really diving into misophonia, learning about it, learning about the brain, learning about myself. What I've come to understand, it's not so much about the sound, it's the meaning of the sound, which is under that. And you said something about, as a child, you remember your mother being bothered by sounds, and I'm just curious, was that very upsetting for you as a kid to see that, or how that affected you as a kid?
Well, I remember it because I only remember it because she expressed disliking certain sounds that I was making, like chewing gum was
Mm.
something that she would comment on. She really didn't like it. She didn't want me to chew gum anywhere near her. And otherwise, I wouldn't have noticed. I didn't, I didn't care at that age, I didn't care about what my mother was feeling or desired. I just noticed it because I wanted to chew gum and she was saying, don't chew gum around me. And I felt
Mm.
confused and irritated by that because I wanted to chew gum. Like we would be in the car and I wanted to chew gum in the car, but she would say, don't
Mm.
chew the gum in the car because it would bother her. Um, and so I just noticed it. And I think it stood out to me as strange. I couldn't understand why anybody would be bothered by that.
Mm. Mm. Okay. Um, Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I'm not going to get into your personal history, but yeah, were there other, I guess, yeah, I always, I think it's what happens with misophonia is something like the sound gets linked to some sort of threatening, some sort of threat. And do you resonate that for you that maybe, I don't know, maybe something with your mom or maybe something else going on in your household was threatening?
Um, it's possible. I mean, I don't know. Um,
Hmm.
so I I had one. So the big underlying problem that I have that basically ran my life for many years was fear, and um so I did not feel safe, and I was super hyper vigilant. Everything felt like a threat. Everything. Um,
Hmm.
I just could not. I never ever felt safe, no matter what. There were no conditions that I could get that felt safe. Even in my own home, I did not feel safe.
Hmm.
And that was going on, like I said, for many years. And so I don't know. I don't know exactly what um, triggered that. I mean, I think it could be. I could speculate. I don't have any specific memories
Hmm.
of any event. I think that
Hmm.
in many cases people may have those specific memories. In my case, I don't. I could speculate that
Hmm.
um, it might have been a birth experience, because I think that my birth was relatively traumatic. So it's just speculation,
Hmm.
but that seems the most plausible to me.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Um, yeah, it's all very interesting and the brain and how it makes connections and sounds and things like that. But thank you for sharing that. I'm looking at my list here. So obviously I know that you um have been through a lot and have healed a lot for yourself and probably have done a lot, but I'm curious if you could share what other types of things that you did or still do as far as lifestyle, like diet or meditating or exercise or something that you felt also helped you to heal from all this stuff.
Um, so for me, um, I tried lots of dietary things, and they all were made for me. They made things worse because I was it was more of the same thing of me trying to avoid, and so food became a threat, and so then I was trying to avoid the threats, and so that was just problematic. So dietary changes were not in any way helpful for me. They were they were just
Mhm.
complicated and problematic. Um, uh, I did some types of meditation that were also harmful. Um, so um, meditation can cut both ways, but also some forms of meditation have been very helpful.
Mm.
So very gentle, simple, direct forms of meditation have been very helpful, like breath awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. So just, yeah, I know there's all different types of meditation, but and mantras and this and that, and but how simple just breath, mindful breath, uh,
Mm.
meditation, how powerful that is in itself. Um, 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 did you do any thought work or anything like that? I know you said you obviously brought in a lot of acceptance. So around, I'm not going to fight this anymore or flee from this. So, but any other types of working with thoughts or anything like that?
Don't think so. I mean, I don't think so. It's not, no, I didn't do anything directly that I can remember.
Okay. Okay. Trying to think of other questions. I guess general, I mean, we kind of talked about this, but general thoughts about the nervous system and misophonia. I guess it goes back into the sensitive person, but any other thoughts on just the, the nervous system? I'll just leave it at that.
Well, you're asking my opinion.
Yeah, your opinion. Yeah.
So my opinion is that we are enormously adaptive and resilient, and that we can our nervous systems are capable, obviously, of producing an incredible range of experience, for better or for worse. And so if we become conditioned to certain types of experience that we don't like, then that can be very difficult and unpleasant and scary and overwhelming, and can become stuck. Those patterns can become stuck because if we don't have the right knowledge and the right support to make the positive changes, we can easily continue to reinforce the same conditioning. But my opinion is that we can heal from all of that. It's just a matter of releasing that old conditioning and replacing it with the conditioning that's supportive of the experience that we want.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Any tips for people with misophonia? Obviously, your book is very accessible and helpful, and just made a lot of sense to me. But any people that might be watching this, any tips on for anybody with misophonia struggling with it now?
Sure. I mean, again, like I said, I believe that healing is absolutely available, and it's not as difficult and scary as many people have come to believe. And
Mhm.
that one thing that I think is really helpful is to recognize that the pain and suffering of continuing with the old way of thinking about it, because a lot of the time the old way of thinking about it is there's something wrong with me, I'll never get well, or everything else around me needs to change to accommodate my special condition, and that old way has not produced the good results. And so I think it's really helpful to recognize that and finally admit that if I want the change, if I want the healing, if I want to finally be free of this, then I have to let go of that old way of thinking about it and that old way of perceiving it, and embrace that it is possible for the healing to take place in this other way. And so, sort of like hitting rock bottom in a sense, like, okay, once I realize that the pain is too much and I just don't want to do that anymore, then I have to let go of the way that I've been thinking about it in order to allow for the new way, which will offer the real healing. So that's, I think, a helpful tip, is just to recognize I have to let go of that old way if I want the new healing. that's really important and helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's, why I started with these other therapists, to kind of gain stories of people that were healing, because there was this narrative around that you have this brain problem and it's a disability that you're going to be stuck with forever. And then I start meeting people like you, and it's like, wait a second, what's really going on here? So it's, yeah. But yeah, I think it's tough to find providers out there too, to help people that really know about this. And I know a lot of people have spent a lot of money trying to find people to help them, and it goes kind of south for a lot of people. So, and it can be a tough condition to treat, but it seems like you really you put the effort in, and it seems like it takes effort to change, that's for sure.
Yeah, I
And
think it's also,
yeah.
I think it's helpful
Wh-
if the coach or therapist or whoever it is somebody who
Mhm.
has firsthand experience, because otherwise it's very challenging. If somebody just has theoretical knowledge, it's difficult for them to have confidence, I think, that there is actually
Mhm.
a solution, and then to be willing to support a person in doing what's required, because it does require courage for sure, because the habit is, again, to try and avoid, and because there's fear involved. And
Mhm.
in order to
Mhm.
change that, you have to have the courage. And if somebody doesn't have that confidence within themselves as a coach or a guide to support somebody to know that it's safe, so that that person can know within themselves that it's safe, then it's going to be very difficult.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to this, or thoughts, or any extra things that you wanted to add, or we did kind of mention a lot, and thank you for sharing kind of exactly the tools you use that helped. Uh,
Yeah, I can't think of anything else.
okay. Um, you did do EFT tapping, and you did find that somewhat helpful a little bit, but it wasn't like the thing that cracked the memories, it seems, for you. That's correct.
Yeah, I found it very helpful. But like I said, I
Hmm.
found that it seemed to me that there was a lot there that was extra, that was not needed. Um, I can't say for sure
Hmm.
that the tapping is not helpful, but it doesn't seem to me that it was needed. And um, and it definitely required a lot of effort. And when for me, there was some superstition involved. It's like I was taking it on faith that if I just followed that procedure, it would work. So,
Hmm.
but I didn't have any reason. I
Hmm.
didn't know why it would work. And so I was doing this thing kind
Hmm.
of superstitiously, hoping that it would work. And it was sort of working, but then it was slow and I didn't have absolute confidence in it. Um, but then when I simplified it and streamlined it, then I started to really understand, for myself at least, I understood, and it made sense to me why it was working. And then I could just drop the tapping and the specific protocol, and I could just do the essence of it. And then I got much better results.
Hmm. Okay, that's interesting. I don't know if this is interesting to you at all, but I just learned there's obviously EMDR therapy that's
Right.
out there, but there's in the Netherlands, there's some psychologists that created EMDR 2.0.
Okay.
And the theory is, and it makes a lot of sense to me, that you're just bringing up the trauma memory and taxing the working memory in your brain, and it's apparently working really well. And I think it's a little different than regular EMDR, but I feel like that's kind of similar to what you did, is just bringing up these memories, and doing something to
Yeah.
tax your brain while kind of the dual attention of it. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that could be exactly
maybe.
how it works. The way I thought about it was that um, the visual that we process our experience visually, and so if there's something that I don't
Mm.
that I'm avoiding, something that I'm avoiding, then I'm not seeing it. And so if I'm moving my eyes
Mm-hmm.
through the full range of vision, then I'm going to integrate whatever it is that wasn't seen. So if I'm thinking of the memory and then moving the eyes, my theory was I'm just integrating the whole thing a lot instead of trying to work to keep something out. However it works, it doesn't matter. It just what matters is if it works or not. And for me, it worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
I guess that's good. Good. All right, cool. All right, then I think that's I just wanted to acknowledge that you know, you seem like a very special person that experienced an extreme amount of suffering in your life, but really came through the other side, and it's working to help other people, and that's pretty amazing thing. So I think that's pretty amazing to have seen some of your story and the things that you've written, and your experiences, and so that's a lot, and I'm like waiting for you to write your full life story into one book, because I think that would be very inspiring for a lot of people too. I don't know if you're ever thinking of doing that, but yeah, um, maybe one day. Yeah, but what was that?
It's not something that I have planned.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. You have a very inspiring story though. That's for sure. So, on so many fronts. So, thank you for talking with me. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we will talk again. All right.